You may or may not remember that there was a period of time when more powerful industrial nations traveled around the globe searching for less powerful nations to trade with. China was the victim of such new imperialism. There was a high demand for Chinese tea, silk, and porcelain in the British market. So, the British Empire had an opium deal with China. Wars broke out because of China's attempts to squash the opium trade. You see, Britain was illegal exporting opium from India to China since the 18th century. This influx of opium caused a bit of a problem in China. Addiction led to a mess of social and economic problems. So, the Chinese government took matters in their own hands and destroyed a few chests of opium, 1,400 tons to be precise, and yada yada yada, the opium wars had begun. The British, being the bigger, badder force, captured Nanjing in August of 1842 and put an end to this little squabble. Wars end with treaties, so let's end the opium wars with a treaty that everyone could agree upon. After the Treaty of Nanjing was signed, China was required to pay Britain for all their losses, give up Hong Kong, and increase the amount of ports where the British could trade. This was the first of a slew of unequal treaties that China was a part of. By the late 1890s, a secret Chinese group, the Society of Righteous and Harmonious Fists, had begun carrying out regular attacks on foreigners and Chinese Christians. Many were peasants, particularly from the Shandong province, which had been previously struck by natural disasters such as famine and flooding. In the 1890s, China had given territorial and commercial concessions in this area to several European nations, and the Boxers blamed their poor standard of living on foreigners who were colonizing their country. So, a rebellion occurred. Because of all the uprising and unrest, the Qing dynasty was weakened. Eventually, the dynasty came to an end and China became a republic in 1912. More on that later. After a slew of Chinese nationalist uprising like the Boxer Rebellion and a growing discontent because of poor economy, the last Qing Empire abdicated the throne. After the fall of the Qing, China was slung into a civil war. The two parties involved were the Chinese Nationalist Party and the Communist Party of China. The Nationalist Party had some thoughts on how China should be governed. They basically believed that China should become a democracy. This idea was supported not only by the wealthy Chinese, but also the United States. Go capitalism. The Chinese Communist Party, led by Mao Zedong, had some thoughts of their own. They believed China should be, communist like the Soviet Union, and as you would probably guess, this was supported by the peasants and the poor and the Soviet Union. After several years of fighting, the Communist Party of China gained control of mainland China in 1949, where they established the People's Republic of China. Those other pesky Chinese nationalists were forced to retreat to the island of Taiwan. Let's talk Mao for a minute. Not only having a pretty high kill-death ratio, Mao was also responsible for some disastrous policies, the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution. Mao wanted to speed up economic growth in communist China. In order to do that, a commune system of farming was introduced to increase food production. This system involved filling quotas or else. Not only did Mao want a speedy agricultural system, but he also wanted to industrialize quickly in order to achieve this dream. A historically agrarian population was supposed to work in the industrial sector. Now think about that. If you worked on a farm your entire life, you were now expected to work in the local factory. You may not know what the heck you were doing, so guess what happened during these years? Famine happened. The Great Chinese Famine claimed the lives of 36 to 45 million people. The Great Leap Forward was a flop. In an attempt to reassert his authority, Mao launched the Cultural Revolution. This revolution was aimed to purge the bourgeois and non-revolutionaries. The Red Guard was formed and the country's cultural heritage was destroyed. Over 1.5 million people died. The Cultural Revolution crippled the economy and thrust China into 10 years of turmoil, hunger, and stagnation. Then, Mao dies in 1976, Cultural Revolution over. Enter Deng. After Mao Zedong's death in 1976, Deng gradually rose to power, eventually earning the nickname Architect of Modern China. Deng engineered important reforms in virtually all aspects of China's political, economic, and social life. The goals of Deng's reforms were summed up by the four modernizations. He planned to modernize agriculture, industry, science and technology, and the military. Deng's strategy for developing China into a modern industrial nation was the development of the socialist market economy. For the most part, the four modernizations worked. Industrial output rose, per capita income rose. There was one problem, though. Many people wanted democracy. In 1989, protests led by pro-democracy students began in mid-April. Those who wanted more political freedom in China started to gather in Tiananmen Square. By April 21st, 100,000 students marched on Tiananmen Square. Pro-democracy demonstrations began to occur all over China. By May, martial law was declared and the military was sent in to restore order. As you would guess it, angry students confronted the military and violence ensued. There were civilian and military deaths, but those death tolls are highly disputed. For 2 years after the incident, the Communist Party restored some traditional policies in terms of political control. There was a downturn in the economy. By 1991, Deng was ready to revive some economic reform, but there was no intention to revive any kind of political reforms. Well, there you have it. The Chinese Communist Revolution in 5 minutes. I hope you've enjoyed your 5 minutes in front of a screen. Remember to like and subscribe.